Good afternoon. I was asked to give a reflection during this Lenten time on giving. And I really thought about that because giving is really an important part of our life as Christians, part of our life in the church. But as I first thought about what I was going to say, I was a little concerned that people might say, oh, there he is, he's going to be talking about money, giving money during Lent. And while that is an important part of parish life, keeping ourselves financially solid, I'm really going to take a very different perspective on talking about giving. Very recently, I read an article in America magazine. It was written by a man who is a college professor, but really what he was talking about was his life with his wife during this pandemic of being in a small home, he says, with 5 children, ages 2 to 9. He called it pandemic parenting. And it was a unique reflection, and I thought something a little bit different for us as we try to reflect on giving. And so rather than kind of have a macro view of giving, I'm going to take it to a very small focus. Parental giving. What our parents give to us. And he began his story by talking about an event that happened in the family with those 5 children. One afternoon, one of his children came running out and said, "Mommy," to Daddy, "Mary has a hole in her head. Mary has a hole in her head." Well, the parents were really panicked. They looked and they saw their daughter, who was, I think, 4, bleeding from the head. And so they said, "We've got to take her to the hospital immediately." And so they got all the kids rounded up. They didn't put their shoes on, put the kids in the car, and went right to the hospital, which was about a 15-minute trip to the emergency room. And the doctor looked at this little child, obviously, who was scared and crying. And there was a slight dent in the head, but it really wasn't a hole in a literal sense. It was really a superficial bleeding. And so he said, "Don't worry." They just gave the child a few stitches and everything was fine. He went on to talk about some of the other challenges that he and his wife will sometimes face with children. At times there's yelling, there's crying, there's whining, there's arguing, pushing and shoving. There really is a lot of childish activity going on in the home. And that's what struck me, because he talked about what happened to his one daughter, or what happens with all the children when they are together. He wasn't talking about yelling at them or getting angry. He was really talking about how he and his wife, in their parenting, in this very difficult time when they are isolated and locked in, that they really listen to their children, they really care for their children. And it struck me because oftentimes for parents it is a tumultuous time. But my thought today as we reflect on giving is that we would look at parents, because oftentimes parents are taken for granted in the giving that they do for their children, even when they grow to be adults. They're often overlooked, not thought about. And I think it's a key way to reflect during this Lenten time. So what I'm suggesting for those of you who are listening is that you take some time to reflect on the giving, first of all, of your parents. When you were growing up, and maybe you don't even remember anymore, you fell and had to go to the emergency room. Someone bullied you. Someone made fun of you. And your parents came to you, you went to your parents, and they comforted you. They helped you. They really gave part of their life to you. And that's the kind of giving that I want us to reflect on today. The giving that parents provide for their children. Because oftentimes it is forgotten, and there's a lot of frustration in family life. The notion in the church sometimes is that we take things for granted. But I want us to reflect on you. How often do you give gratitude to your parents? Do you tell them? Do you thank them? Do you realize what they have shared with you? And every family is not perfect. And maybe there are situations in your family where the giving has been limited. There has been anger, and people after a time don't talk to one another. I would encourage you as well during this Advent time to think about giving to a family, particularly to parents, where there's been a breakage, where there's been a cutting off, and how important that is. And so maybe as you reflect on giving to your parents, you maybe think about something that you have to deal with them where something has been broken. They haven't been cared for, or you feel you haven't been cared for. As time goes on, as we age, we need to put together those things that have been separated. So while I ask you to think about the gifts that your parents have given you and your gratitude for them, or the gift that you as parents give to your children, to be grateful that you've had the ability to be able to do that. But also during this Lenten time, to think about those moments in family life where there has been separation and distance. And perhaps you can take your prayer life and try to work out a connection, a reconnection to parents. This family did a wonderful job in 5 kids in a small house, keeping them together, showing their love and appreciation for their children. It's a difficult thing. It is not easy. And oftentimes, the life of a parent, the gift of a parent, is forgotten. And so that's my encouragement, to remember for yourself the good things that you've experienced. Encourage yourself to go to your parents if there's been brokenness, and to give thanks to God for the gifts that you have been given if you are a parent. In this little black book that we have given out for Lent, the person describes what they do during Lent. The woman says, during Lent, it's kind of like I do my major cleaning. It's not just that I dust, but I get to the sofa, I move underneath it. In other words, I really get to the heart of who I am. And this is what she writes. During this Lenten time, it's not simply getting rid of sinfulness, but rather it's opening my heart and mind to a fresh, deeper, and fuller experience of the presence of God. And so that deepness is what I encourage you for your parents, to have that kind of deep gratitude that comes upon reflection, not to take it for granted, but to realize the blessings of parents. And when maybe like that little girl, there's a hole in some place, we go and we try to repair that, to put it together again. So Lent is this time of renewal for all of us. Renewal of the experiences that have been positive, and encouragement to renew experiences that have been difficult. So as we continue during this Lenten season, be people of the gift, be givers, be grateful for the gifts that you've received, and try to be people who give gifts to make the life of others worthy and aware of the presence of the Lord. So let us be gift givers, especially during this pandemic time.